Good morning and welcome to Toronto Police Headquarters. Today, Homicide Detective Sergeant Idsinga will update the media on the investigation involving Bruce McArthur.
Good morning and thank you for being here. I will be providing you with an update on the Bruce McArthur investigation. As you know, on January the 18th, Bruce McArthur was arrested. He had been charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder in relation to the deaths of Salim Essen, Andrew Kinsman, Saroush Mahmoudi, Dean Lissawick, and Majid Kahan. Since then, we have continued our investigation, including searches of numerous properties associated to Mr. McArthur, a review of material evidence, and interviews with dozens of people, many of whom have come forward to us. One of the focuses of the investigation has been on human remains found in the planters from 53 Mallory Crescent. The remains of at least 6 individuals have been recovered from these planters. I have already released the fact that the remains of Andrew Kinsman were located within the planters. There are several ways of identifying remains in a case such as this, including fingerprints, dental records, and DNA analysis. Some of these processes are obviously more time-consuming than others. We have now identified the remains of 3 individuals from these planters, number 1 being Andrew Kinsman, number 2 being Saroush Mahmoudi, and number 3 being Skanda Navaratnam. As you know, Skanda Navaratnam was one of the 3 males who were the focus of Project Houston in 2013. Skanda Navaratnam was 40 years old when he was last seen on September the 6th, 2010 in the area of Church and Wellesley. He was reported missing 10 days later by a close friend. Today, Mr. McArthur is being brought back before the courts. Mr. McArthur has now been charged with 1 additional count of first-degree murder. This new charge is in relation to the murder of Skanda Navaratnam. Mr. McArthur is now alleged by investigators to have committed 6 murders, and the case is before the courts. I want to thank those who have come forward. If anyone has not heard from us, or they have information related to Mr. McArthur, please call us at the Toronto Homicide Squad or anonymously through Crime Stoppers.
Detective, can you talk about the Toronto Star report today from 2003 that Bruce McArthur allegedly beat someone over the head with a steel pipe? Were you aware of that? Can you talk a little bit about that information that came out at the start today?
I am aware of that, but as I've stated previously, I'm not going to discuss any of Mr. McArthur's past involvement with the police.
Did he have a criminal record when you began investigating him as a suspect?
Technically, no.
Can you tell us, was that because there was a part to identify these next 2 people? Was it DNA? What led you to identify these next 2 people?
The first individual was identified through fingerprints. The next 2 were identified through dental records, and DNA analysis is still outstanding on the remaining 3 sets of remains.
When you say McArthur technically didn't have a criminal record, is that because we've reported previously that he had a pardon? However, there appears to be a disconnect here. We can still see his criminal record when we go to the courts. Yet, did he technically get a pardon, or did he not?
Again, I'm not going to comment on it. You're not technically seeing a criminal record in the courts. If you're seeing a record of conviction and you have access to that and want to report on that, that's up to you.
Detective, do you still believe that there may be more victims in addition to the 6?
We do, yes.
And do you have any idea as to how many more? I know that you said that you were looking at the cases from the 1970s. How far back could this go? How many more victims could there be?
We have no idea.
So has everything wrapped up in terms of remains from Mallory Crescent? Out of all the planters that were seized, is it just 6 people that were in those planters?
6 people in the planters from Mallory. We've been through all of the planters that we have seized. We haven't found any other remains. That's not to say we're done with the examination at Mallory. As I've stated before, we would like to go back there when the weather warms up a little bit and see if the dogs have any further
Is
success.
there a fear that there's stuff underground?
We don't know that yet.
So when you say,
talk about the investigation in terms of where you go next? Are there any other properties that you want to go and do similar types of excavations like how that's going?
We have one further property that we're working on where we may do excavation. We're just not at that point yet, but we're looking at several other properties, 2 of which we're particularly interested in. But some forensic testing still has to be done before we further our investigative steps at those properties.
how many planters were there, Detective Sergeant Idsinga, there were originally 15 planters that you said you had. I've heard reports of as many as 20. How many planters have been seized, and you said how many have you actually gone through?
We've been through upwards of 20 planters.
Do you know where he was killing these people allegedly? Was it only at the Thorncliffe address? Do you believe that any of the murders occurred on Mallory?
I can't get specific about where the murders occurred. We do believe we have multiple murder scenes, though.
Detective Sergeant Idsinga, you have confirmed that the Thorncliffe Park was one of the scenes.
We believe it is, yes.
Is the other scene Mallory present?
I'm not going to confirm that yet.
Detective, is there reason to believe that there potentially could have been murders outside of the Toronto area that this is saying beyond jurisdiction?
We don't know that yet. Obviously, it's something that we're looking into, but we just don't have any evidence yet to support that theory.
When you say multiple murder scenes, you're not confirming Mallory Crescent, but how many other potential ones aside from Thorncliffe?
I don't know that yet.
So are you tracing his steps? Can you just tell us what you're doing right now? Are you seeing where he's traveled to worldwide? Are you looking into cases or cold cases elsewhere? Tell us what you're doing at this point. What are you actually doing in tracing his steps over the last, I guess, 4 years?
And that's exactly what we're doing. We are tracing his whereabouts as far back as we can go, essentially, and seeing if we can link any outstanding occurrences to his movements, and then see where we go from there.
If the investigation, has there been any discussion about setting up a special task force, because this could go on for quite some time?
We do have a task force going. It's expanded since the arrest, and we do anticipate using that task force to continue the investigation for quite some time.
And what is any estimated timeline here? Are we talking months? Are we talking years?
Impossible to say. It could be months. It could. I don't think it's just going to be months. I would say it's going to go into the years, and depending what we find and where the investigation takes us, that will dictate how long it goes on for.
If McArthur's...
What way McArthur and Navaratnam were connected to each other while Mr. Navaratnam was alive?
Sorry, can you ask that again?
What was the connection between them before Navaratnam's death?
I'm not going to get into specifics about that.
Detective Sergeant, how has this case been wearing on you, if you can give an idea? Detective Sergeant, can you just speak to how, you did speak about this being a very difficult case. Personally, what's this been like for you to unearth these planters, finding these men who have been missing for all these years?
Well, obviously it's a very unique type of case. Myself and the people working with me, we've been doing this for a long time, so I'm not going to say we're used to seeing things like this. It's completely different, but we'll get through what we have to get through. I admit it's very tiring, it's very disturbing, but I've got a great group of people working behind the scenes that aren't the ones standing up here in front of the camera. Dave Dickinson right there is one of them, and they're doing a great job, and we'll get through what we have to get through.
If McArthur's convictions had shown up, if his previous convictions had shown up, perhaps during Project Houston even, could this have saved lives?
You're asking me a hypothetical question on an area that I'm not going to comment on.
Because you did say that he did not technically have a criminal record. If we were able to find the criminal record, that meant that police were also able to find that record. Is that not correct?
Again, technically, even if we could, I'm not going to comment on someone's criminal past. They're before the courts.
You said that you've gone and traced you're tracing back his movements over the last 40 years, or as far back as you can go. Does that mean you're actually going outside of the country to perhaps destinations he's traveled to in the past?
We are, yes.
Detective, can you just talk about, as some more victims are being identified and you get in contact with their next of kin or whoever it may be, what their reactions are? Are they, you know, does it give them a little peace of mind because these people have been on the missing list for quite some time? What are their reactions to this?
It brings them some peace and some closure. It's still shocking to them, obviously, the circumstances. So the families have been very good with us. A lot of them are overseas, and we're dealing with them over the phone, which isn't ideal. So I appreciate all of the open communication we've had with them as well.
Can you give us any details as to how?
And we have 6 charges and the 6 body parts. Do you still believe that he acted alone? You're saying that there could be more charges laid?
There may be more charges laid. I believe there will be. And I have no evidence that would tell me that anybody else was involved in this.
Can you give us any idea as to how these people were killed? I know that they were dismembered to put in these planters, but can you give us any description as to how these people may have been killed?
I can't, no.
Detective, did Bruce McArthur have a partner?
I have a quick question. You have 20 plus planters, and can we confirm that you've gone through them and you haven't found other remains?
Correct.
Okay. So what are you basing the expectation that there may be more victims? Is that on the remains that have not been identified yet, or do you expect to find other victims beyond the planter?
Both, yes.
Sorry, can you elaborate that?
Can you elaborate on that, because we don't hear her question on camera.
Sorry?
Different. This is going to be hard for you to answer.
There's no questions.
But you can try. Mr. McArthur now charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. Is there a point that would be helpful to yourself and your team that if he were to cooperate and help in a bigger way, is that something that can be encouraged? I know it's out of the box a little bit, but would that help rather than the game of cat and mouse and trying to put it all together?
Absolutely, that would be encouraged. That may be an issue for the prosecuting crowns to address down the road. So we've got to put our case together that we have so far, make our disclosure on the case, and then that's something that the lawyers can discuss.
There's some
that Bruce McArthur is not cooperating right now with the investigation?
I'm not going to comment on exactly what Mr. McArthur is saying or not saying.
There's some unsubstantiated.
Southeast AIDS Prevention has said that they're looking to do a third-party investigation into Project Houston and Project Prison. Can you comment on that?
If people want to look at what we've done, then I welcome that.
There's some unsubstantiated reports that you have located pictures of potentially 8 people on McArthur's computer. Is that in any way accurate? Have you seen more pictures of other potential victims in some of the stuff you've been able to gather from his Thorncliffe apartment or elsewhere?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on unsubstantiated rumors.
We just want to say, is that accurate, or that report, or is that inaccurate?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Did Bruce McArthur have a partner, and if so, have you been able to locate that person, and are they cooperating?
We've located and interviewed several close associates of Mr. McArthur.
Romantic? I mean, were they romantically linked? I mean, is this a living partner?
To get into that would be getting into the evidence that witnesses have provided us, and I'm not going to get into that right now.
So just to be clear, there are still the remains of 3 people that have been unidentified in the planters. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we could be seeing at least 3 more charges.
We could be.
Is there a reason that you've not laid charges of anything like indignity to a human body at this point, that you've just done first-degree murder?
Not something that we would normally do. First-degree murder is the most serious charge in the criminal code. To lay anything else at this point in time would be somewhat pointless.
Detective, do you know how all 6 have died and you're just not able to say?
No.
You don't know how they've all died?
Correct.
Do you have guesses, or speculate, or educated guesses as to how they might have been killed?
I believe we have evidence on how some of them may have been killed, but that's as far as I'll go.
We spoke with the family of Jonathan Riley, who say that they've been in touch with police and that he is considered a potential victim. What can you tell us about that?
And that's a tough question, and essentially I don't want to answer that because we've been in touch with several different families where there's outstanding missing persons and outstanding, well, actually everything from outstanding sudden death occurrences to outstanding missing persons to outstanding murders. And for me to comment specifically on what cases we're looking at would really be unfair to families whose need more answers in relation to their loved ones.
How many
Just given the
cases are you
history-
looking at? How many historic cases are you looking at this point? Can you give us a ballpark figure? When you say several, is that 10? Is that 5?
To put it in perspective, there's multiple outstanding murder cases that we're looking at. I can't get into numbers. There's hundreds of outstanding missing persons occurrences that we're looking at. And like I said, there's even some outstanding, I shouldn't say outstanding, but occurrences where there's been a sudden death that we're looking at.
When you said that you believe that some of the victims died a certain way, you're not sure about others, but given that this isn't a serial killer, is it likely that they would have all been killed in a similar manner?
I don't know.
When do you think you'll wrap up at the Northcliffe property?
I've given several different estimates on that, and I've been wrong every time. So we've been there for over a month, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're there for another month.
This has been called an
At that property?
No, we haven't.
This has been called an unprecedented investigation. You yourself have said there's hundreds of officers involved. How sustainable is an investigation of this size for Toronto Police? How much longer can it go before you start having to pare down resources because just of the sheer amount of officers being used?
Depends what we find. As long as we're finding things, it's not getting pared down, it will get expanded. Our deputy chief is here today, and I'll confirm to you that whatever I've asked for, I've received. Manpower is not an issue.
Sorry, and can you just clarify how many other properties you're looking at now? You're at Northcliffe, Mallory's on hold until the spring. What other properties or how many other properties are you looking at?
I won't get into specifics with numbers, but we are very interested in at least 2 or 3 other properties.
And are they in Toronto?
In the GTA, yes.
You talked about the investigation expanding. Is that since your last news conference?
It has expanded since our last news conference.
Are there
Can we
other
talk about what that looks like?
Victims or
The
in terms
expansion?
of other
Yeah.
stories? How is it expanding?
Expanding as into the occurrences that we're looking at and how deep we're going into the different occurrences.
So just to confirm, you're looking at sudden death cases that would now be considered murders?
We're looking at sudden death cases. I wouldn't say that they're being considered murders yet.
But there's
Okay.
potentially.
Potentially, we're looking at them. Sometimes we're looking at them, and the answers are very obvious as to what happened in that occurrence, and we're passing that on to the families.
Can you tell us what led you to actually arrest Mr. McArthur?
In respect of,
The circumstances of his arrest. Can you get into that at all?
I won't get specific about that either. I've been asked that many
How
times.
many different countries are you looking towards to outside of Canada?
I can't give you a specific number on that. No.
Are other
Sorry.
police forces in the GTA working with you on this investigation now?
They are, yes.
How many others?
Internationally, there have been other police forces involved as well.
Which police forces?
I won't get specific about that.
Is it fair to say York, Durham, Peel is all involved?
I've said before that the OPP's been involved. They continue to be involved, and surrounding GTA services are also involved. As you can imagine, by me standing up here and talking about asking people to come forward with missing persons reports, there's been a surge in missing person reports, not only in Toronto, but in the GTA as well. So.
Have the families
All
of
20
the
planters
alleged
recovered
victims
from the
been
Mallory
cooperative,
Crescent
and have you
No, they had
obtained
other,
DNA
there's some other places they got
samples,
from
from them to help you
It's like a
identify
restaurant on
the-
Church
the
Street.
remains?
We have, yes.
Is it fair to say that of the 6 victims that you guys have identified, at least for 3 of them, you don't have body parts per se identified as relating to them or DNA as relating to them? Is that fair to say?
No, as I said earlier,
You've got 3 finders that you've identified, you've got the DNA or the dental charts or whatnot.
different processes take different amounts of time. Like I said, fingerprints we can turn around very quickly. Dental comparisons we can turn around relatively quickly. DNA takes some time.
How long does it take? Weeks?
It can take weeks, it can take months.
When do you expect to identify the rest of the remains?
Well, if we have the profiles of the victims in some fashion, we may not. Dean Lissowick would be a great example of that. He wasn't reported missing, so we wouldn't submit his profile to the Center of Forensic Sciences to test against the remains. So we may have some of those remains may be the same situation. So we do have, of the missing persons we've identified, we do have some sort of comparison that we've submitted. We're just waiting for all of that to come back.
How much harder does that make it though? If you can't identify remains,
He said it's gonna take another
when you
month.
go into trial and court, how much harder is it
He didn't.
to say
He said he was wrong.
remains you have?
Well, it's obviously a hurdle that we have to get over. I think we can get over that hurdle in courts with the evidence that we do have.
Because you could have unidentified remains in those planters all the way to trial where you know that there's body parts belonging to someone without you knowing who that person is.
Correct.
What was Sarush Mahmoudi's relationship with Bruce McArthur? Because I know previously there was no known relationship. Was it sexual in nature? And what do you know about that?
We don't.
As for Mr. Navaratnam, the latest victim, it's been reported that they had a romantic relationship going back to 2000. How was he never on the radar of Mr. McArthur before in this investigation?
Again, I'm not going to comment on Mr. McArthur's status in this investigation at any previous point in time.
Thanks very much, everybody.